Yo, what up, everybody? This is Nothing But Bangers, aka MBB, aka Bangers, aka Nothing. That's what some people call me in their Twitch chat. I think it's because they may not know, but now you know. So let's get straight to it. There was a Little Legends League tournament held via Limitless TCG, which is really cool that Limitless is actually hosting some of these events now, but I'll get into that later. Let's talk about this tournament because I actually think that this is going to set a huge precedent for the next big tournaments that you may be playing in literally this weekend. So it's almost 3 a.m. here, but I had to get this video out ASAP so that way you can have this information and do with it what you want. Now, I will tell you up front that I have signed up for one of the tournaments this weekend, and hopefully my schedule will allow me to play. I would love to play in it, but I'm also, really looking forward to seeing the results and covering it. And then I think around Monday, there's a huge content creator tournament that I definitely want to check out and at least watch. I don't know that those people will really take it as seriously as some of the people that are playing this weekend, but I do think that it should be a good little piece of data to break down, especially with what deck choices they bring. But let's get to the details on this chart, and I'm not going to go over every single deck on this list. By the way, shout out to the one person who brought Venusaur and Execute. I wouldn't have done that personally, but I appreciate it, and every time I see the deck get played on stream or somebody reference it on Twitch or YouTube, it's really cool. And obviously a lot of love being sent back. I appreciate y'all. But let's get to these actual decks that were played in this Little Legends tournament. So the number one deck that was played was Blaine, and that was my pick of the tournament. If you go in the Discord that was hosting this tournament and search Nothing But Bangers, you will see me talking about Blaine. And that I was like, hey, if Blaine can beat Dragonite, I'd probably bring Blaine because I thought that Dragonite could be a little sketchy of a matchup, but I didn't spend a lot of time playing it, so I really didn't know. And then you have a lot of Blaine, a lot of Misty, a lot of Dragonite, and then you had some fighting decks, and then you had Arbok, a few Alakazams, a few Melmetals, which was Melmetal really cool. There's a really cool idea behind that. Basically, they were stalling. So they would stall with Snorlax, let it absorb damage, hopefully get multiple stallers, so that way you couldn't Sabrina and take advantage of that, but basically build up Melmetal and then have Melmetal sweep. The problem is that Melmetal can't sweep through Blaine if Blaine draws like double Ninetales, double Blaine. Because Blaine's Ninetales just one-shots Melmetal, even with the resistance. So that was a little bit of an issue, but again, a really cool deck. But the reason why I think that this tournament and the results may end up kind of having an impact on the tournaments that are happening this weekend with, you can play any deck. By the way, the Little Legends League, it was you could not play any EXs. So I haven't explained that. Poor job on my end, but there's no EXs. So that's why you see Blaine played so much. Like, Blaine is so good, it can be played in the EX format as is. Right? Like it got top 8 last week, and it should not be a stranger to any top 16s or top 8s moving forward. Like, Blaine is a very, very good deck at what it does. And let's just go ahead and kind of take a look at the top 8 decks, but you can go ahead and pause the video if you want to check out more of the decks on here. But let's go ahead and start talking about the actual deck list. So let's get started. And by the way, if you do like the content, I really appreciate you guys dropping a comment, dropping a subscribe, hitting that little button that's right below me. But basically that helps you stay alerted whenever I drop some new content. And let me know in the comments, what deck do you think is good enough to win the tournament or at least top the tournaments that are happening this weekend with the data that I'm about to dump on you? Let me know in the comments. I want to know. And it kind of is something that, hey, we can come back after the tournament and say, hey, you were right. Or maybe, some people were a little bit off. So I want to know your opinions in the comments after this video. So let's get to it. So starting with the person who won the tournament, and it was really cool because I actually played this person in top 2. Drake was able to get a first place after getting second place this past weekend. Really cool to see that. But again, just looking at this deck, it's very straightforward in what it does. It's trying to drop Ponyta, Ninetales, in the early game and then evolve them and then immediately start going to work with Blaine, Giovanni if it fits better, and then worst case it's Sabrina bringing out, the Pokemon to finish off. One red card in here. I thought that red card was a really strong card in this particular format just because there were so many stage 2 decks. A lot of stage 2 decks. So red card was a really good card to disrupt them. But again, like Blaine is going to take up like half the top 8 spots, right? So I'm going to go through each deck, but this is one Blaine deck. So let's keep going. All right, going to second place, which is a really cool brew. And one reason why this brew was able to survive the Blaine kind of onslaught was the fact that Machamp has 150 HP. So that's the first thing I'll point out. Because Machamp has 150 HP, it's able to survive and tank a Ninetales. So the best case scenario for a Machamp player is they put their Machamp in against your Ninetales, knock it out, you send in your Ninetales, you deal 120, but then they're immediately able to knock out that Ninetales, and now you're trying to scramble to get your Rapidash online. And they are, and they probably, get the Machamp finished off, but they still have Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan as well. I think that one of the things that's really cool about this deck is that it was really, kind of out of the blue. Like, not a lot of people saw this coming, me included. And again, that's just because I thought that Blaine was just so much stronger than like almost every other deck, right? Like, this deck is not going to compete against EX decks, even if you switch the Machamp to Machamp EX, because it's just not able to, right? Like, for whatever reason, it could be matchup. It could be the fact that you need to have Machamp on curve. It could be the fact that Machoke gets one-shotted by Pikachu with the Giovanni. And so, there's just many ways that this deck just kind of struggles with EXs. But with no EXs in the format, this deck was able to do pretty good. And again, like, the Hitmonlee can throw some people off, especially, if they're loading up their bench and not really understanding or knowing that Hitmonlee is coming. So, shout out to I think it's QQQ. That's what it was. All right, so I believe this was the third place deck, if I've been pulling these up in the correct order. Worst case, it's top 4, but this is another fighting deck, and this is going to be around Mankey Primeape, which is really cool. I remember my first budget deck that I ever put out on YouTube was literally Primeape and Doug Trio. I thought that deck was so cool, so budget friendly, right? And the thing is that when you play against a deck like this, you just don't attack the Mankey. Like, you don't attack it. Unless you're one-shotting it, you don't attack it. Because then when you have to deal with the Primeape, it's a whole different ballgame. So, 2 Sandslash and then 1 Hitmonlee. Solid deck. 2 potions to kind of keep their attackers alive. And again, going into Blaine, the only thing you got to worry about is like everything in your deck gets one shot by Blaine Ninetales, right? And then on the flip side, like, nothing on this deck really one-shots Ninetales unless you get Primeape with some damage on it, or maybe you stack some damage early, you chip at it, and then you're able to go ahead and finish it off with Sandslash. So again, just looking at this, like, Blaine is just, like, in my opinion, it's just better than almost every single one of these decks. Again, the Machamp does provide a little bit of an issue. Now let's get into some of the different type matchups that Blaine may struggle with in these non-EX formats. And again, like, personally, I would not like to see another non-EX format until we see a new set. Like, personally, I just think it's going to be nothing but Blaine, MBB, right? But I think it's just going to be a lot of Blaine, and like, that's cool, but I'd rather just play a different rule set, right? Like, just bring something else in terms of rule sets. I just think that Blaine is really, really strong. It's so strong it's played in EX formats. So, when you play a tournament that says, hey, no EXs, like, Blaine is going to be one of the strongest decks, like, all the time. And, again, you could say, hey, Blaine, you could ban Blaine, but, that's just kind of unfair. And then, what are you going to do next? Ban Misty too, So, and it also opens up a bunch of different, can of worms with, like, Venusaur and Executor, right? Like, what's going to check that deck, right? If there's no fire, because Blaine is the best card in fire, like, how are you going to keep those decks in check? So, again, I'm not necessarily a fan of seeing another non-EX tournament, but I understand that's what people may want, and, it just kind of is what it is. But when you talk about the other top 4 deck, this was brought by Gadget Bug, if I am correct. And again, this is going to be double Greninja, that whole line. It's going to have Psyduck and Golduck, which really, really good damage, by the way. 2 energy for 70, that's solid. And then Starmie with the free retreat. But again, like, all these get one shot by Blaine and Ninetales. So like, you know, it's kind of one of those things where, you know, hey, hopefully you catch their Ninetales before it knocks out one of your Pokemon? Question mark. You know, so it's really tough. And then again, you're playing a stage 2 where red card can, you know, make you a little bit more vulnerable. But this deck has got the double Misty to high roll people. It's got one potion and then one Sabrina as well to bring out things from the bench. So again, yeah, hey, if there's going to be a deck that's going to be able to beat Ninetales or Blaine's Ninetales, it's going to be probably a water deck, in my opinion. And, you know, that's probably what happened throughout Swiss a few times. All right, now, one of the more spicy decks that we saw, and it is a direct result of the rules, no EXs. But let's talk about the top 8 decks now. So these are 5 through 8, right? So I believe this is King Jesus. I may be wrong in the names because I opened up the tabs in a different order. So I apologize if I did. I'm trying to keep, I've got a list over here and I'm trying to check back and forth, you know. But this is going to be double Doug Trio, right? So you got Diglett, Dugtrio, you got Kangaskhan, and then you got Vulpix. And what Vulpix is trying to do is it's trying to use Telvis to stop your opponent from attacking. So really interesting choice there. I honestly never thought of it because, you know, 50 HP is just not a lot. And, you know, you could get donked really quickly turn 1 by opening Vulpix, which, again, is pretty rare to happen, right? It's only a 1 in 4 of your basics, but still would stink to have that happen. And then, obviously, Diglett gets one shot by some things in this format as well. So if you open that up, you're like, ah. So, I mean, there's literally 75% of the basics that you can open up. You can just result in you getting donked or you getting knocked out if you go first. So, again, like, I think that some of the reasons why we're seeing these decks in top 8 is partly because, like, maybe some people had some good coin flips, maybe there were some good streaks, but, like, personally, if I was going into a tournament and I saw this was my matchup and I'm playing Ninetales, I'm like, great, this is perfect. You know what I mean? So that's just my opinion, though. I'm just one person. But again, the double red card for disruption, the double XP to get in and out of the active, double Sabrina, double potion. I mean, hey, this is probably the truest deck in terms of non-EXs, right? Like, this is probably the truest deck. Like, this deck is not competing with EXs at all. It's just straight up a deck built for this format. And, you know, that's really cool to see. So I am glad that we did get to see at least one of these decks get the top 8. And, you know, congrats to this person. All right, so let's head up another Blaine's deck. So again, like, you'll notice that top 4 only had one Blaine's deck and it ended up winning the whole thing. And so in top 8, I believe half the field was Blaine's deck. So this is the second one. Now, what's different about this one is the inclusion of Magmar. I think this is actually more true to the deck that got top 8 in the EX tournament. I think this is almost maybe an identical list. I'd have to look back at it to double check. But again, this is double Ninetales, double Rapidash, and then a single Magmar. Dude, I love Magmar, by the way. Magmar, like, helps you get to some different breakpoints of damage as a basic that, like, none of the other cards in the deck do. So Magmar is really cool, really cool in this deck. And obviously, if you ever played, you know, Gen 1 Pokemon in the trading card game, you know, there's people that have, you know, a lot of memories with Magmar from that fossil set, I believe is what it was. It was a fossil Magmar. I think there are 2 Magmars, but the fossil one had a really cool couple of attacks. One, you know, for 1 energy, you could do 10 damage. For 2 energy, you could do 20 damage. But one of the attacks was like, if it, you know, it makes your opponent coin flip. And if they whiff on the coin flip, their attack does nothing. So yeah, Magmar used to be, you know, super double OG banger back in the day. So it's really cool to see Magmar getting some love in this non-EX format. By the way, I believe this was Rego. All right, so going into another deck in the top 8, this is another Blaine's deck. And, you know, this is about 1 card difference, I think, from the other deck that we just looked at. But again, just kind of looking at this is double Giovanni. And then double Giovanni, really cool in the Blaine's Ninetales deck, in my opinion, because it allows you to donk your opponent more, right? It allows that to happen. And it can allow you to save your Blaine. Like, that's one of the big things with this deck, right? Is if you can save your Blaine and still get the same knockout with Giovanni, like, you're just like, yes, this is great, because now my Blaine might come in handy where it gets me an exact knockout. So really clutch there. And I believe this was piloted by Spore Venom, which is another opponent that I played in the previous tournament. And top 8, I believe I played them. And they brought the Charizard EX deck, if you remember. So really cool to see some familiar faces hitting another top cut. And I know that, some of these people were itching to get a W, get another championship, get a top 2. So really cool to see this, and really encouraging, right? Like, you should definitely be very excited if you're doing consistently well in these events, in my opinion. All right, so let's get to the last deck that I will cover, and this was Hat, which, by the way, Hat, one of the pioneers of using Executor and Executor EX in the same deck. They brought the Victory Bell Executor deck, if you remember, from, I believe, the second tournament. I also covered that tournament. If you want to check out some more of that footage / coverage that I did, where I break down the cards in the decks of the top 8, definitely worth checking out. Could give you an idea of some things that you might see in the upcoming tournaments, because I know there will be a couple of tournaments being played this weekend. And hey, I'm trying to give you the best chance to do well here. But let's talk about this deck, because there is one curveball that we haven't seen until now, which is the double Far-Fetched. And Hat did mention this in chat, but one of the cool things that Far-Fetched allows you to do is donk your opponent. Yes, that is right. Donking is definitely a strategy go-to for these aggressive decks. And it's very simple how it donks. It's hoping that you open with a 50 HP basic Pokemon, and hey, if I go second, I have Far-Fetched and Giovanni, I can donk you out of the game. So, really powerful there. And again, I've had some bad memories with Far-Fetched. I believe I got beat by a Far-Fetched for an early prize knockout in the Swiss of the previous tournament. So, again, Far-Fetched is one of those cards that slots in really nice in some of these aggro decks. The only pushback that I would give to Far-Fetched in this deck is that Far-Fetched is really dead when you don't open it. Like, it feels like it's really dead when you don't open it, right? Like, if you start drawing it like the middle of the game, if the game goes that long, which you're hoping it doesn't, even if you draw like turn 4, turn 5, you're just like, oh no, I needed to hit my Ninetales, I needed to hit my Blaine. And so whenever you play Far-Fetched, you're kind of giving more cards that might be bad for your Pokeball, if the game lasts a little bit longer than you wanted. So that's the only pushback that I'd probably say against Far-Fetched, but it probably won them a few games, if not at least one, throughout the Swiss tournament. But again, half the top 8 was Blaines. I think if this tournament was to happen again, there would be a lot of Blaines. So again, I'm kind of hoping that there's something different. But I asked you a question at the beginning of this recap, and I want to know, let me know in the comments, what do you expect to see in the top cuts of the tournaments this weekend? Do you think Blaine is going to heavily influence, now that people are seeing that it can be a contender not only in the EX format, but obviously in the non-EX format too? Let me know in the comments, and if you like more content, definitely stay towards the end, because there should be some videos popping up that you should check out.